10 a.m. Central Africa time. So I think we'll get started. Dear participants, dear colleagues, a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us in this online training on science, technology, and innovation policy and policy instruments for the SDGs organized for the Africa region. The training is organized by the UN Interagency Task Team's Workstream 6 on capacity building in STI for the SDGs. My name is Sengmei Wang. I'm an Associate Program Specialist in the Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy section at UNESCO. Together with Dimo Kalowski from UNCTAD and Min Del van der Laar from UNU Merit, I co-chair this workstream on capacity building. And I'll also have the pleasure of moderating the session today. So to kick us off, I'm very pleased to invite Mrs. Mahale Teshume Kebede, science policy expert from the Department of Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation at the African Union Commission. She has over 15 years of experience in regulatory and policy-related issues of STI at the intergovernmental level. We'll invite Mrs. Mahale to give us an opening address. Mahale, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Zhengmei. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the global community had been heavily invested when agreeing on a comprehensive framework with 17 goals when addressing the pressing challenges of our planet. These, we all know, were the Sustainable Development Goals. Achieving all the 17 ambitious goals indeed requires a transformative approach that harnesses the power of STI in policy development for informed decision-making. As the STI community, we are enthusiastic in our discussions on the STIs for SDGs, since they do provide a strategic blueprint for leveraging STI to accelerate progress towards the SDGs in Africa. Dear colleagues, we do stand at the precipice of a new era, one defined by the transformative power of knowledge, innovation, and collaboration. Africa, with its vibrant youth and flourishing scientific spirit, is showing great promise towards claiming its place as a global leader in the knowledge economy. Knowledge creation and development on STI policy that ultimately supports research and development for innovation and technology are indispensable facets of any inclusive growth and sustainable development. From our standpoint, this is why we consider such trainings critical so that we are equipped with the right tools for policy development to keep up with the ever-increasing dynamic nature of the science and technology that's out there. As you may all be aware, the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa, STISA, is a 10-year strategy that articulates Africa's STI focus within the AU's Agenda 2063. The next iteration of this continental strategy, STISA 2034, was undertaken last year through a consultative process comprising of all the key STI stakeholders in the continent, culminating at its adoption by the ministers of STI and the AU policy organs at the AU summit at the beginning of this year. The strategy has a bold and ambitious mission to harness the transformative power of science, technology, and innovation in accelerating Africa's transition into a knowledge-based and innovation-driven continent. This mission is rooted in the recognition that STI is not just a tool for economic growth, but a fundamental driver of societal development, improved quality of life, and sustainable prosperity. To achieve its mission, STISA 2034 is anchored on 6 key strategic priorities where STI interventions will be central. As you will hear later today, for each of the strategic priorities, clear objectives are elaborated along with an indicative list of actions to meet these objectives. The continental strategy will be implemented by all AU member states, the regional economic communities, and STI stakeholders on the continent. And so We are confident that the current training will allow for agency on ways and means of acquiring and transforming knowledge, building capacities, taking into account the need for employing technology assessments and technology foresight to ensure relevance, efficiency, and preparedness of the impact of technologies on our socioeconomic development. On behalf of the Department of STI, I wish to extend our gratitude to our partners, the organizers of this training, the UN Interagency Task Team, for the invitation and opportunity to engage in this training, which is designed for impact. We are certain that this session will contribute significantly to our common efforts to achieve the SDGs through STI. I wish us all successful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mahali. As you mentioned, I think this 2034 is a timely and important reminder of how important it is to strengthen collaboration in STI in Africa, and we hope today's session will contribute useful ideas to that broader effort. And now, before we dive into the main content, let us take a couple of minutes to know a little bit about the team behind this training and how this training is structured. Can you see my screen?
Yes. We cannot see you using Maida. We cannot see your camera.
Yes, I think there's a small issue. Maybe Cecilia, can you help me to see if I have the function? Thanks. Let me first tell you a little bit more about the team behind this training. It is sorry. Okay. Can you let me know if you can see the slide about IATT?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. The team was established back in 2017 and brings together UN agencies, regional commissions, and other partners to co-develop and deliver joint trainings and learning materials focused on STI policy and sustainable development. It is currently supported by UNESCO, UNCTAD, UN-IATT, UNIDO, UNEP, UNECA, and other regional commissions and agents of the United Nations, as well as the European Commission's Joint Research Center and University of Sussex. We've organized over 10 different workshops at the regional level and also at the international level. This training will be our 11th one, and on the screen, you will see the number of trainings we delivered for different regions. And we've trained over 1,500 participants from 75 countries, and more than half of them so far have been women. And the team has produced a set of learning materials such as guidelines, training presentations, exercise, and recording, which are all available on the website of our team. And it's really a great source for anyone interested in the topic to explore, and my colleague Minda will kindly drop the link in the chat so you can consult. And now you know about the team, let's look at the training structure. We have 3 sessions in this training, and today we are at session 1 on current approaches to STI policymaking in the context of SDGs. And then on Wednesday, we have session 2 on STI policy instruments design and implementation. Then next Monday, on May 26th, we have the session on STI policy monitoring and evaluation. And we want to remind you that the connection link will remain the same for all 3 sessions. And here we are at session 1. We will start by 2 presentations. And after that, we will have a Mentimeter exercise where we'd like to hear your opinions through online quiz. And this part will be followed by a panel discussion where we will pick up questions from the chat to guide a conversation with panelists. And this is where you can make your voice heard and help enrich our discussion. So please drop your questions in the chat if you have any to help us build this discussion together. We have then another 4 presentations, including 2 from regional perspectives. And after the presentations, we will have an open discussion where you may have the chance to raise questions by taking the floor. And today we have a group of excellent speakers. Mrs. Mahalia Teshome Kebede, which you just met. We will have Tommaso Ciardi from UNIMERIT, Cornelia Sinova from UNESCO. We also have Angela Sarcina from European Commission's Joint Research Center, Pierre Boileau from UNEP, and Christophe Hammer from UNIDO. And then we will hear regional perspectives from Almami Conte and Rioboka Marakabi from SEDEC Secretariat. And today's session isn't just about hearing from the speakers. Our dear participants, your questions, your ideas and experiences are a key part of making this training meaningful. So please use the Zoom chat function actively to share your thoughts and questions. And in the end, I'd like to introduce you an online tool that we'll be using throughout the training, and it's called Mentimeter. You'll be invited to answer quizzes, and then we'll have some interactions there based on your answers, which will be shown live on the screen, but your participation will be anonymous. I'll ask my colleague Min, please kindly display the Mentimeter screen now to test our first question, just to know a little bit of where our dear participants are from. Min, could you please share your screen?
I think you should stop sharing it, and then I can start.
Yes, we can see your screen. And participants, you will have 2 ways to take part in the Mentimeter question. Either use your phone to scan the code displayed on the screen, or you can go to the chat box to use the link to be posted by our colleague. Let's now maybe have a look at our first question. Min, could you go to the next slide? Yes, our first question is, which country are you working in? We see many answers. Thank you for participating. Namibia, Mauritius, South Africa, Kenya, Botswana, Tanzania. And we have 51 participants answered. Thank you very much. We see participants from different parts in Africa. And Min, if you may, let's go to the next slide. To go for our second question, describe the type of institution you are working in. We have participants from Ministry of STI or Science or Higher Education, from academia and research institutes. Yes, I see some participants are posting answers in the chat. If you could maybe scan the QR code on the screen or use the link that Mindel posted in the chat so that we can see your responses live on the screen. Right, as we know, science, technology, and innovation by its nature cuts across all sectors. And so we are so glad to see we have participants from different types of institutions who are interested in this very important topic. Min, can we go to the next question? At what stage is your national science, technology, and innovation policy? Great. We can see some we do not have one yet. Recently became official, in implementation, or under revision. Right. We see this diversity is a big strength for our discussion today. It means we'll collect perspectives from countries at various stages of their STI policy journey. So I'd invite everyone to think about how your own experience connects with that of others during the training, and please share your experience in the chat to interact with each other. And hopefully today's session will offer some inspirations for your STI policy journey. Thank you very much, Min. Now we've tested Mentimeter, and we'll use that again in today's session. Okay, great. Now let's move to our first presentation, starting with the basic question: what are the key obstacles in aligning STI for the SDGs? And here's some introduction of the current approaches to STI policymaking in this context. And for that, we will have two speakers for this joint presentation: Tommaso Ciardi, who is a senior researcher at UN-IATT from UN University, and Spru from University of Sussex. He searches how innovation, technology, and structural change impact employment, inequality, and sustainable development. He leads large international projects and advises governments and multilateral organizations like EU and the UN. We also have Cornelia Tinova, the head of the Natural Sciences sector at UNESCO Regional Office for West Africa, based in Senegal. She coordinates STI collaborations and projects with countries in the region with a focus on STI policy, capacity building, and STEM education. And before I hand over the floor, I just invite participants to post your comments in the chat in the chat box, and we'll have the opportunity to pick up some of them. And now, Cornelia and Tommaso, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Zheng Mei, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for joining us for this first session on science, technology, and innovation for the SDGs. We will be discussing this topic, and in this presentation, we will be focusing on how to steer science, technology, and innovation for the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the challenges? What is the current situation in regard to STI for the SDGs? As introduced by Zheng Mei, we will do a joint presentation also with Tommaso from UN-IATT, and I will start with a very brief introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. Next slide, please. You are all aware of the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, but I think it's important to remind ourselves of the rationale behind this agenda, behind the development of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Because they represent a common framework that provides a clear direction for action, particularly in the field of science, technology, and innovation. So the Agenda 2030 was developed to address global challenges. And these global challenges that we are facing today can only be tackled through international collaboration. And therefore, this was the importance of having a common framework for action. Of course, in different regions, different countries have their own national priorities, specific needs and issues, but we all share common global challenges such as, for instance, climate change, the use of non-renewable resources, population growth, and so on. So In order to tackle these global challenges, 17 objectives and 169 targets were established. As you know, they cover the different dimensions, social, economic, also environmental dimensions. And they have been adopted by all countries, by developing countries. And they represent, as I mentioned, a common understanding of the actions that are to be put in place. Governments have committed to establish national frameworks to achieve these goals, but of course action goes beyond governments, and different actors have roles to play, including the private sector, the civil society. And I would like to mention here that although they are not legally binding, governments, of course, need to also report on their progress, to monitor, to put in place means for implementation to reach the various targets. Last year was a very important year for advancing on the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. As you know, the Pact for the Future was adopted in September 2024. It really has focused on new means for implementation, the ways that we can close the financial gap, and to accelerate the action on the SDGs. Next slide, please. What is crucial and really remarkable features of the SDGs is their interconnectivity, because each goal is linked to the others, and they really represent a comprehensive framework for sustainable development. Here, just to give some examples, achieving quality education as part of the targets of SDG 4. This is also essential for economic growth as part of the targets of SDG 8, reducing inequalities, SDG 10. And similarly, we have any actions, any positive outcomes on clean water and sanitation, for instance, in SDG 6, is also crucial for good health, well-being, SDG 3. So there are numerous examples of interconnectivity, positive impacts, but they could be also negative interactions. So therefore, this interconnected approach is key to advance on the agenda on towards sustainable development. So these interactions are very important. We need to understand them. We need also to look at the SDGs as a systemic and adopt a systemic approach. Now I would like to pass the floor to Tommaso, who continue and focus specifically on contributions on science, technology, innovation for the SDGs. Tommaso, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And I think just to follow up exactly what Cornelia was mentioning about the relevance of the SDGs, but also how the SDGs form a common framework to understand what might constitute progress for humanity. It is very important that we think about the SDGs as a potential mean for researchers, for policymakers, for private research funders, for private companies, to think about what are the directions toward which we want to deliver science, technology, and innovations so that they can contribute to progress in relation to the human challenges for everybody. And so what we did a couple of years ago was a global study, which was called the Strings Report, which was looking at the way in which science, technology, and innovation priorities align with the priorities of the Sustainable Development Goal. And happy to share more details. Today, I will give a very brief overview of our findings and the policy recommendations before passing on again to Cornelia and discuss a little bit more in detail what might be the policy actions to steer science, technology, innovation towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the question is whether science, technology, innovation is aligned or not to the SDGs. And I will go a little bit to the details now, but just to give you the spoiler alert, what we find is that there is a quite big mismatch between the science, technology, innovation priorities and the SDGs, which is undermining the progress on the SDGs, or at least is not allowing for fruitfully progress toward the SDGs, exploiting the potential for science, technology, and innovation. So we're going through four main challenges why we do find that there are these misalignments, and again, we'll summarize what might be the main research areas for intervention, and then going a little bit more in detail about those areas. And again, if you want to find more, there's a few interesting articles from Nature about these misalignments across the board. So let me start with the first problem. When we analyze the SDG-related publications worldwide in the Web of Science, and we look at the patent and innovation, which may be relevant to the SDGs, we show that particularly in high and middle-income countries, which do dominate the global research agenda, only 20 to 40% of all published research and only 2 to 0.5% of all patented inventions are related to the SDGs. In addition, if we think about those publications, we consider that 60% of this research is related to a single goal, which is SDG 3, global health and well-being, which mainly focus on the diseases that are most prevalent in high-income countries. So again, it's questionable the extent to which they can contribute to progress in low-income countries, or in this particular case, in African countries. This is augmented by a problem of inequality. As I just mentioned, most of the research is done in high-income countries. So here what we did was simply distinguishing four groups of countries in relation to their SDG performance, to the research performance in terms of number of publications per capita, and in terms of the proportion of SDG-related publications. And in particular for the African continent, what we observe is that the North and South Africa, which are mainly middle-income countries, what we observe there is that they do have the lowest proportion of SDG-related publications, which is around 30% of their publication is related to an SDG. This is despite having a relatively low SDG ranking and having a relatively low research capacity, which is about 0.3% of publications per capita. In East and West and Central Africa, on the other hand, these are the countries that do most of the research which is related to the SDGs. Around 70% of their publication is related to the SDGs. And at the same time, these countries are the countries which rank lowest in terms of SDGs. The problem is, although they mostly focus on SDGs, these countries contribute a very low share of global research on SDGs, which is around 0.06% of the global research on SDGs. The second problem is, as Cornelia was mentioning, it's very important the way in which we do research looking at the interactions between these SDGs. And what we see instead is that, first of all, there's much lower efforts to address complex underlying social issues which are related to deprivation, poverty, inequality, conflict, and so on. So the people and society types of SDGs. Most of the research goes to economic growth, infrastructure, and technical solutions, or to the natural environment. And what is most relevant here is that the research which is done in these areas is not particularly connected to research which is done on people and society, which means that advances, for example, in industry, innovation, infrastructure, or affordable and clean energy does not take into account the challenges which might be more related to deprivations and underlying problem in terms of advances of human well-being. And related to that, when we asked in a Delphi survey to global stakeholders, lots of which were researchers themselves, but all over the area from policy and academia, only a very small share thought that research which is related to scientific areas, so publications and existing technologies, if you want, patented inventions, are not the main areas in which we should invest to address the SDGs. Instead, what they thought are the main areas for addressing the SDGs are mainly social, policy, and political innovations, which are, again, most relevant to address the SDGs. So we seem to have a sort of misunderstanding of the main focus that we need for interventions for STI. Now, the third problem is that we tend to see a misalignment at the national and regional level between the severity of an SDG, which you can see here on the x-axis, going from left to right, the severity of the SDG increase for a country, and the specialization of research in that SDG, which you observe on the y-axis, going from the bottom low specialization to the top high specialization. So what we see here is that on average, although in the case of the SDG 2, zero hunger, so what we see is the case of strong alignment. So we see that countries that face higher problems in terms of the SDG, they also specialize on this type of research. But most of the SDG look like SDG 4, which is quality and education, where we do see that the countries that have the most severe problems in terms of SDGs, they also specialize least in those SDGs, such as in the case of SDG 4. And let's make an example here, but I took, you can find in the report all countries, but I took here a couple of examples, Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if we look at Nigeria, for instance, what we see is that we do have severe SDG issues in terms of SDG 3, health and well-being, and affordable clean energy. But when we look at the research specialization, we see that these areas are not particularly strong in terms of specialization in the country. So there's not much research which is done in this area, which seems to be the most problematic. Or on the other hand, if you see a gender equality, which doesn't seem to be one of the main issues in terms of SDG metrics, tend to attract a much higher rate of research, which is again, which could instead be used for areas which are more problematic. If you see the Democratic Republic of Congo, instead, for example, we see that one of the main issues in terms of the SDG is poverty. And we do see in this case a quite substantial focus on poverty research. But then again, another particular problematic issue is affordable and clean energy. And then we do see a very small specialization in affordable and clean energy, again, indicating a potential misalignment between what might be the main issue and what might be the main focus of the research. The fourth problem is a problem of tending to closing off relevant STI pathways, which means that although there is no single obvious, most aligned pathway of investing in STI for even very specific SDG-related challenges, we do see that some of these pathways tend to be strongly privileged, particularly by more powerful institutions. So this is particularly reflected in our case studies, which show that particular pathways become dominant, and most of the time closing off, reducing the space for particularly local and less powerful STI pathways, which may have a better way of addressing the specific SDG challenges. So this was a case study that we did, for example, in Lake Victoria, where there's a severe problem of overfishing. And what we see here is that there's quite different views in the perspective of the aquaculturists, the technicians, which are particularly focusing on the technical solution to address overfishing, and the local community in perspective. So, for example, in terms of the potential economic benefits of using pond fish farming, monitoring and control system, for example, using cameras and AI and cage in aquaculture, we see that the local community tend to have a quite different perspective about the potential use of pond fish farming and cage aquaculture in favor more of the monitoring of, for example, the larger fishers in the lake. So again, the idea here is that it tends to be that some of the more technical and political powerful views tend to dominate in terms of what are the perspective and what are the priorities in terms of STI. So to summarize, we do indicate 4 main sustainability challenges of current STI. The first one is problems of orientation of global research, which is very low in relation to the SDGs, and which is also aggravated by the inequalities in directing research. So the fact that the countries which are most aligned to SDGs, such as the African countries, are not contributing enough to the research effort. Second is the problem of focus and technical solutions, which is done in isolation from underlying social and political inequalities, which do create potential tensions and trade-offs in addressing the different SDGs. Third, problems of regional and national misalignment between what are the SDG priorities and what are the actual research priorities within the country. And fourth, closing off relevant STI pathways, which also close off underlying diversity and plurality. So we indicate four main areas of policy actions, again, very broadly. First one, we need definitely to increase funding for SDG-related research and innovation, not just any research, but research which is related to the SDGs, particularly in low-income countries, particularly on underlying social issues, and particularly research which is relevant to the regional and local context. Second, we need to promote a diversity of science and technology innovation pathways to address very specific SDG challenges, particularly ensuring that decisions about what are the priorities involve the stakeholders which are affected by those issues and by the research which is done. Third, we need to design accountable initiatives which does strengthen the STI governance and does support open and inclusive processes of deliberation and prioritization, again, which involve different communities. And fourth, we also need to empower stakeholders, policymakers, but any kind of stakeholders in civil society to be able to form their interpretation of what counts as relevant SDG research and innovation. And for this, we do need better data because we do not know enough about what are the main SDG priorities, and we need to have a more user-friendly way of communicating those data and allowing different stakeholders to use this data. And so with that, just concluding that just doing research and development, just doing science, technology, innovation won't contribute to the SDGs. We need to be much more open and inclusive about what are the main directions in which we want to move the SDGs. And with that, if you want more details about that research, you can find it in the Strings report, and I'll leave it to Cornelia to go in a much more detailed potential policy actions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tommaso. Dear participants, as Tommaso emphasized, science, technology, and innovation play really a cross-cutting role in achieving all the sustainable development goals. And although there is no standalone goal dedicated to science, technology, and innovation, we have seen that SDG requires really inputs from science, technology, innovation for their realization. And this is the case in many of the targets of the SDGs. And thank you, Tommaso, for demonstrating some good alignments, but also misalignments that need some specific STI policymaking actions to ensure that STI and research is not just done in a silo, but really addresses and focus on specific targets of the SDGs. I would like just to really emphasize again on the importance of having a systemic approach. And we have seen with the previous slides how the SDGs form a comprehensive a set requiring some organized and systemic approach also in terms of deploying science, technology, and innovation. So to effectively harness the STI for the SDGs in particular, we need to adopt this systemic approach. We need to build a robust science, technology, innovation system by organizing, for instance, the legal frameworks, the regulations, well-thought incentives, instruments, in order to make this alignment between science, technology, and innovation and the SDGs. It's important also to align the national needs, the national priorities, also to this regional priorities, but also the global challenges that are reflected in the different targets of the SDGs. Also, the system is a set of interactions between various stakeholder groups from academia, from private sector, the policymakers. So there is a need to mobilize this collective action. Also, the importance of not only looking at the science, technology, and innovation policy, but also to well articulate it with the other policies, which also have some implications and impact on research and development and also innovation. Coordination mechanisms, funding sources, the different instruments. This is all a set that needs to be approached in a systemic matter. So just to mention that again, what we would like to emphasize is that the SDGs provide a clear direction for science, technology, innovation, for the entire science, technology, and innovation system. Next slide, please. But let's precisely now focus on the science, technology, and innovation policy cycle. And here, again, the importance to see how these different stages also are impacted, or how we can better reflect and take into account the Sustainable Development Goals from the science, technology, and innovation agenda setting through the policy formulation, the decision-making processes, the implementation, and also the policy evaluation. So in all of these stages, what we think it's of crucial importance is to mobilize broad multi-stakeholder involvement in all of these stages. For example, if I take the STI policy formulation, of course, it's important to also have inputs and a role played by the social actor in order to have diverse interests, diverse needs to be reflected in the policy formulation. Going to the STI policy implementation phase, when governments, of course, put the necessary actions into effect, there is also need to continue strengthening and mobilizing a broad stakeholder collaboration to really ensure that these goals are turned into actions. Again, in the policy evaluation phase also, there is need to have an inclusive process and to have diverse actors in order to have more transparent and actionable evaluation. Next slide, please. Let's now just look at kind of traditional way of designing STI policies and what are maybe key issues that a traditional STI policy focus on. It includes, of course, the definition of the broad goals in terms of research, in terms of innovation, in terms of education. It has clear links to the national development plans, to which sectorial priorities are to be taken into account, the legal framework, the governance structure behind the national STI policy, the instruments for its future implementation, the capacities, of course, that are needed. Usually, STI policy have also a framework for the monitoring and its evaluation, and there is always also some regional and international perspective. Next slide, please. But in the context of the SDGs, what we would like to also to emphasize is that science, technology, and innovation has a kind of shift from a national to an international perspective and requires increased collaboration, increased international cooperation. As it was mentioned earlier, the global challenges require this international cooperation to ensure the science, technology, and innovation can address and act on a global level. Also, for that, there is need to foster multi-stakeholder partnerships for increased investment. No country alone, no region alone can act on this. There is also an increasing importance to transition to open science, not only meaning open access and open infrastructures, but also to have a broader participation from the society, to have open dialogues, not only with the traditional knowledge system, the traditional research, but also to consider and to take into account other knowledge systems such as the indigenous and traditional knowledge system to enrich the entire scientific process. Science diplomacy becomes also key if we would like really to succeed on achieving targets of the SDGs. And the notion of directionality, which was already mentioned, giving this directionality to the STI policies would really increase and the success towards reaching the targets of the SDGs. So more inclusive STI policies, focusing, of course, on equal participation of gender equality, indigenous knowledge, and to have improved STI indicators. And I think in Tommaso's presentation, we saw this importance of being able to measure the alignments and how effective the STI policy actions, the research that was leads to also sustainable development. Next slide, please. Just a few examples also on how STI policies can tackle some of the targets. For instance, if we take SDG 4, as I also mentioned it earlier, quality education. Here, for instance, science, technology, innovation policy can support STEM education, digital literacy, research capacity. So this can affect positively the achievement of the targets of, for example, SDG 4, SDG 8. Similarly, we can promote through the STI policy innovation-driven entrepreneurship, job creation, and SDG 9, for example, if we can emphasize strengthening technological development, infrastructural development as well. And many other examples, SDG 13, here the STI policies can really put emphasis on advancing some green ecologies, on renewable energy, and climate resilience strategies. Of course, these are also have a very strong focus on the continental agenda 2063 and the actions that are proposed for the second term of implementation. I think let's move for the next slide, which focus on the methodologies for developing science, technology, innovation policies in the context of the SDGs. Many of these methodologies and approaches exist. Here I would like just to share with you the guidebook that specifically focus on developing STI for SDGs roadmaps, which really propose an approach that closely align the needs and actions on science, technology, innovation towards the SDGs. A second edition of this guidebook is under preparation. But of course, as I mentioned, there are other methodologies, other approaches, but I would like to finish with and conclude on this, which makes also a transition for the next set of discussion, specifically on how we can strengthen the alignments between STI and the SDGs. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Cornelia. Thank you, Tommaso. Thank you very much for this insightful joint presentation. And we've heard from Cornelia some current approaches to STI policy making to address some of the current challenges, such as the misalignment between STI and SDGs and between STI and local challenges, just as Tommaso mentioned. And on the last slide of Cornelia's presentation, we've heard this guidebook developed by the IATT that support the development of STI for SDG roadmaps to address such misalignment. So now let's zoom in a little bit to an example on challenge-led STI roadmaps that has the potential of ensuring STI investments are more responsive to social needs. And this presentation will be delivered by Angela Sassina, Economic and Policy Analyst at the European Commission's Joint Research Center, where she leads STI for SDG activities, supporting policy design and implementation in Africa and the EU neighborhood. She holds a PhD in economics from University of Ferrara and South China University of Technology. And participants, please continue to post your questions regarding the presentations, and we'll have the opportunity to pick some of them up after this presentation. Angela, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Zheng Mei, and thanks, colleagues, for the previous presentation, which opens the pathway for this presentation on STI roadmaps. So what I'm going to share today is a practical approach to STI for SDGs roadmaps. I will provide hints on the methodology and some countries' experiences. But just to first reconnect to what the colleagues were just saying before, I would like to stress once again that for achieving the SDGs, we require systemic transformations across key societal challenges. So from food systems to energy access, education, climate resilience. We need to take into consideration the SDGs as a package of sustainability challenges that can be addressed through STI. And indeed, each of these transitions or transformations calls for systemic changes in policies, in investments, and in behaviors that can cut across different sectors, and also, as we have seen in the previous presentation, across also different levels of governance. And this means that they also require collaborative efforts among different stakeholders. And so in this context, we see innovation not only as research and development or market applications, but also as a lever for changing systems. That includes social and institutional also innovation. So global and national policies need to reflect this broader understanding of STI if we want to really have an impact on the Sustainable Development Goals. And this shift calls for a different understanding of innovation as compared to what was only a few years ago. An understanding that encompasses social, institutional, and policy dimensions. As we see here in the slides, we need to embrace innovation as a means to transform systems we rely on, and not just to improve the existing ones. So in this way, we can say that the systemic transformations have brought us to rethink the boundaries of STI policies, broadening the scope of innovation policies, rethinking the framework within these policies operate. As mentioned, traditionally STI policies have focused on promoting research and innovation for economic growth, while now we need to think about STI policies to address specific sustainability challenges, to mobilize STI to address the SDGs, to achieve the SDGs. So in this sense, we with this shift in the scope of innovation policies, we've been reflecting also on how research and innovation strategies can deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. And one answer from us is that they can deliver on the SDGs, first of all, by leveraging the local strengths. So the way we put it is that we need to reconcile the top-down and the bottom-up dynamics of STI for the SDGs. This aligns with the broadened STI policies that recognize the importance of tailoring approaches to the local context, while keeping into account also what happens at the global level. So addressing global challenges locally in a way, which means encouraging also the local levels, regions or countries to contribute to broader goals, to global challenges by focusing on their own strengths, on the local opportunities and the local capacities. And to do this, what really needs to be taken into account is the local specificities. So when, for example, looking at the STI potential, we also need to put it into relation of the environmental and societal challenges that places are facing. So in this context, STI roadmaps can play a role. They can be conceived not only as planning tools, but as systemic frameworks. They can help countries to set shared priorities, align with different actors, with different policies, and coordinate investments or projects across different sectors that are not specifically or are not only specifically related to STI. In addition to this, what we find and we promote is that they work even better when they're built in a co-creative and evidence-informed foundation. So as Cornelia was mentioning just a few minutes ago, in the context of the UN Interagency Task Team, we have developed a guidebook for the preparation of STI for SDGs roadmaps. It's a guidebook that is aimed at, in particular, at policymakers, providing a step-by-step advice for practical policymaking. It focuses on the design stage of the roadmaps, demonstrating that the design underpins effective implementation. The guidebook has been tested and has been used extensively during the first round of the Global Pilot Program that was launched in 2019 with a set of 6 countries, some of them also African countries. And then at the JRC, we have, let's say, pushed this forward and translated this guidance that is provided in the guidebook in a concrete and place-based methodology that has been applied in 5 African countries, and we aim to apply it even beyond the African context. So as mentioned, this approach that is provided in the guidebook relies on 6 steps to develop roadmaps, and the idea is to provide also a tailored approach on the different steps based on the country context and the needs that each country faces. The final aim is to identify STI objectives that can address the sustainability challenges of focus and come up with a set of instruments, projects, investments that can deliver on the Agenda 2030 and, of course, also on the green and digital transition. So as a first key aspect, what we when we set up the foundations of this work, first of all, we set up a country team that mainly sits at the Ministry of Research and Innovation, or STI, or higher education, depending on the context. And or in the science councils, depending also on the governance structures of each country. And then together with the country team, the first step is really to identify the sustainability challenge of focus on which we are going to develop the STI roadmap. Another key pillar is the fact that during the process, during the road mapping process, the analysis of the current situation, so the contextual analysis, is based on 4 key pillars that I'm going to describe in the next slide. Another key operational point that this methodology features is the fact that it's co-creative and relies on the participation of the different stakeholders to gather information, but also to build consensus on the STI areas that are identified and that are meant to be prioritized for investments. And finally, there is a joint deliberation with the stakeholders of the action plan, and I'm going to show how in a slide. It's not very practical, but I'm going to show how this is done and what is a possibility to do that. So in terms of analytical pillars, what is important at especially at the very beginning of this process, but also throughout the policymaking the process, is to understand the context. And to do that, we not only need to rely on information related to the STI context, so the STI potential or the STI policy mix, but we also need to understand how the sustainability challenge of focus is actually affecting the country. What are the possibilities to improve it? What are the gaps that need to be covered in order to address this sustainability challenge? So we have identified 4 key pillars for the analytical phase, which exactly focus on the analysis of the sustainability challenge, meaning that we need to look at the main SDG indicators, but also other data that are related to the sustainability challenge. Then the policy document review, literature review, and also some other qualitative information that we gather through interviews. We, of course, need to look into the STI potential, so within the analysis of the main indicators related to STI that can go from patents analysis, but also publications, as we have seen in the previous presentation, but also the socioeconomic performance and how this is related to the STI performance. Of course, also in this case, the literature is very relevant, together with complemented by case studies and interviews. And another pillar is related to the STI policy mix, so analyzing and studying what are the main actors involved in the STI ecosystem, not only looking at the actors that are strictly working on STI topics, but for example, if you're looking at a sustainability challenge that is let's say focusing on food systems, we will also look at the actors that are related to the food system in relation to STI. Same thing for the analysis of policy instruments. We need to analyze the STI policy instruments, strictly speaking, but also the policy instruments that are that have an STI component that can be related to the sustainability challenge of focus. Another key component, and then these 3 pillars are, these 3 analytical pillars are then triangulated to identify STI investment opportunities that from the analytical point of view, so from evidence, have can provide opportunities to improve on the sustainability challenge of focus. But then this, let's say, needs to be discussed and checked with the stakeholders, because policies cannot be drafted in a vacuum, and the participatory methods are fundamental to confirm and to discuss the solutions. So in this methodology, the entry points and the moments in which the actors were involved are several, going from scoping interviews to online and in-person workshops, stakeholders and policy surveys, and also in-depth interviews. In all these steps, according to the evidence we gather, we discuss the findings, but also we start defining what are the possible STI solutions that can address the sustainability challenge of focus. Here, I'd like just to show briefly how the participatory deliberation happens. During the in-person workshops, we asked to the participants to reflect on possible STI solutions. In particular, this is a case that is referring to the improvement of energy efficiency. And we asked the participants to reflect on possible STI solutions that can address the sustainability challenge. The group discussions focused not only on technological solutions, but also non-technological ones. And also we tend to take into consideration also the place-specific factors that can affect the solutions and the policy design. Last point that I'd like to share is the actual roadmap. Of course, this is just an example. This is in particular a roadmap that includes around 13 actions. And as you can see here, there is a concrete action that can be, for example, the establishment of an eco-innovation council, like in this case, but also mobilizing the diaspora through an established network. And for each action, there is the identification of a leading institution, partners, and possible outputs and outcomes through a time frame that is established together with the country teams and the stakeholders. So just to wrap up, STI for SDGs roadmaps can absolutely contribute to systemic transformations. They aim at aligning policies, actors, and investments with sustainability challenge of focus. They also must be inclusive, context-driven, and focus on specific challenges that places are facing, so not only sectors. And finally, the global support also should focus on building capacities, facilitating co-creation, also to favor ownership of these strategic frameworks, aligning also the financing with these national priorities. And this was my last slide. I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Angela, for this rich presentation that shows us STI roadmap as a systemic framework to help deliver onto the SDGs. And maybe you could also share the links to the resource you mentioned to the chat to participants. Now let's pause presentations for a moment and take some time to dig in a little deeper into what we've heard so far. And for that, we'll start with a few Mentimeter questions and move into a panel discussion. And I'd like to invite my colleague Pierre Boileau to moderate this part. Pierre Boileau is a senior environmental affairs officer at the UN Environment Program. In this role, he has led his team and over 200 experts to complete the 6th edition of the Global Environmental Outlook, or the so-called GEO6. Pierre, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Zheng-Mei. I hope everybody can hear me all right.
Yes,
and thank you very much, Tommaso, Nelly, and Angela, for your presentations. We're going to go through three Mentimeter questions, just to find out from the participants here. We have about 180 of them here, what their situations are, and give us a sense of where they're going. I wonder if, Min, you might be able to put up the first Mentimeter question, and just as you did for the opening, either click on the link, use the QR code, or go to Menti and enter in the code at the top of the page here. So the first question is, Min, could you please identify obstacles for aligning STI with the SDGs in your context? So we have several choices here, and I wondered if you might be able to choose from them to give us a sense of what your main obstacles are in your situation. I wonder, Tommaso, from your study, if you could just maybe give a bit of a commentary on what's coming up here in the pie chart.
Yeah, I think it seems to be quite distributed. It's interesting to see that mainly the poor understanding of the relationship between SDGs. I think this is quite important, as we discussed. There's very little work that connects the different SDGs. The dependence on foreign researchers, this is something that we have discussed a lot. And I think as I was showing at the beginning, the fact that there is so much, well, there's so little research which is going on in low-income countries is highly problematic, because then priorities are driven by the research frontier, the innovation frontier, which comes from abroad. And again, this may close down different pathways. So this is why countries may choose to rely on certain technologies, in particular foreign technologies. Okay. This is quite insightful. What's interesting to see the low funding for grassroots innovation, which is where, again, our stakeholders across the world seem to suggest that grassroots innovation may be much more relevant for addressing the SDGs than more sort of technical advanced innovations.
Okay, thank you, Tommaso. Min, could we go to the next question, please? So switching from obstacles, we would like to know if you could identify 3 interventions that could steer science, technology, and innovation towards the SDGs. We've seen in the studies that that needs to happen. I wondered if you could choose from the options here and give us your sense of where you think these interventions could be. And again, Tommaso, I wonder if you might be able to just give us a sense of what you see coming up here and if this aligns with your research.
Yes, I think it does. Quite importantly, the involvement of different stakeholders in research priorities and funding decision. I think this is the main thing that we find. I think one of the issue that we haven't discussed in detail is that many times this involvement of diverse stakeholders may not be equitable. So even when we have research collaborations, there tend to be quite lots of disparities. I think going more in detail, having equitable relations between the different partners and stakeholders is relevant, and definitely increasing R&D for SDGs. Even though it's interesting because as I was mentioning, in most of the African countries, most of the research is actually related to the SDGs, and definitely much more than in high-income countries. So it's interesting, though, that there's a view that is still not sufficient, or perhaps that answer is suggesting that international research should be more related to the SDGs.
Okay, thank you, Tommaso. And then finally, participants, can you identify the institutions that design and propose STI policy in your context? I think it's important to be able to give us a sense of which institutions are contributing to this. This is great. So far, we only have STI ministries contributing. We have a few here from academia, international partners. I see. Okay, so it is spreading out. but mostly still the ministries of STI, science or higher education. And a number of people, a number of the participants are also from those ministries, so that's good to see. We have other science innovation agencies, which may be either part of government or part of the private sector or non-governmental organizations. And then academia is still contributing a fair bit as well. So thank you very much. That helps us get a sense of the work that is being done and who is working on it, and the types of obstacles and interventions that you think are valuable. We have a few questions that have come in through the chat, and I wanted to try and start off with perhaps some specific questions that we might be able to get off the table, because I don't know if we have answers to these right now. Nelly, there's a question from Caleb Muya Adelowo about the UK, United Kingdom FCDO project on STI policy implementation, especially the facilitation of the functionalization of national research and innovation funds. I don't know if you have any information from your side that could help us or help the participants understand if this particular project is still going on and how it's contributing.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Indeed, we are currently working with 2 countries, Ghana and Nigeria, on this project, which is just starting. But what maybe is of interest to the participants is really to emphasize, of course, the need to have good science, technology, and innovation systems and well-designed science, technology, innovation policies that address also the sustainable development goals and their own national priorities. But in the case of this project, is really to ensure that the policies are leading to good implementation. So in this case, focusing on the instruments related to the National Research and Innovation Funds. I think this will be discussed in the second session. The need to focus on implementation of policies through the design and also well-governed policy mixes. So I think that project illustrates an example of how to focus on policy implementation by paying the sufficient attention to policy instruments. In this case, research funds, but of course, this is just one of the instruments. So I think it's more the discussion on Wednesday that will be really focusing on this. But yes, just to mention that the project is ongoing and that we particularly focus on instruments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Tommaso, there's a question related to some of the slides that you presented. How do you model the interactions that you had in your slides in a quantitative, analytical way, instead of using a qualitative approach that seems to have been adopted? I suggest the use of system dynamics models for this purpose. This is from Devapriya Dawarsurendra. Tommaso, do you have a bit of clarification on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Pierre, and thanks for the question. I'm not entirely sure if the question was actually on the initial slide that Cornelia presented, which was looking at the work of LeBlanc done a few years ago on the interactions, which was indeed a qualitative work. So trying to understand, talking to stakeholders, how these SDGs are related. In our case, when we're analyzing how they are in fact related in terms of research, and I think this is important, the distinction is important. We're not modeling the way in which these are de facto related, the SDG different goals and targets. What we look at is whether the research is related. I think that goes a little bit into a technical discussion, but to make it simple, we have different areas which we identify, research areas which we identify, which are related to each of the SDGs. And in each research area, each research area, may be related to more than one SDGs, but most research areas are related to one single SDGs. So with that information that we know which area is related to which SDG, particularly when there is more than one, then we can look at the concurrence of those SDGs in different research areas and simply create that network. So that network shows that actually, if we look at the amount of research which is done in different areas, most of this research is specific to a single SDG and not looking at several SDGs. So this comes from an exercise of all the publications in the Web of Science. It's not causal though, but it cannot be causal because we're simply looking at how the research is done and not what is the relation between the SDGs themselves.
Okay, thank you, Tommaso. There's a related question that I'll come back to in a second. Either Tommaso or Cornelia, has there been a proper assessment of human resources in relation to science and technology in Africa? Do we know if our African Union colleagues or AMCEN or others, have they done an assessment of the human resources that are available in STI policy?
Maybe I can try to respond to this question, Pierre.
Yes.
I think we have representatives from regional entities who also present later. Maybe they can also touch on this in their intervention. But to mention the national, let's say, situational analysis that precedes the science, technology, innovation policy design. And part of this mapping, diagnostic exercise, it's also part of reviewing the capacities, the existing capacities, and what are also what actions needs and what also capacity building programs need to be put in place to ensure a sound governance of the science, technology, and innovation system. So I think it's really an important aspect of the mapping, of the diagnosis. I'm not sure if such assessment exists at the regional level, but I think each country kind of tries to review what are the capacities existing in the science, technology, and innovation arena.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. And I'll come to a question from Louis Sobamana. Are there any available and standardized methodological approaches for assessing and evaluating STI policy? I think that, and there are a couple of other questions on that, that will be addressed on day 3 of the training. Am I right, Nelly?
Excuse me, Pierre, can you just repeat the question?
Sure. There's participants are asking about standardized methodologies for evaluating and assessing STI policies.
Yes, thank you, Pierre. The first session of this training will focus on the monitoring and evaluation of science, technology, and innovation policies. What I can maybe briefly say is that as part of the science, technology, innovation policies, usually it's strongly recommended that a monitoring and evaluation framework is designed as part of the entire policy development process. But I think this will be more discussed in the last session of this training. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. There's Tommaso, just going back to your response to the previous question, Ebenezer Kahuna Nina, pardon me if I've mispronounced that. Why do you feel that more R&D would lead to solving societal problems? So Ebenezer's asking for a clarification.
Yeah, so it's not to say that we do not need research and development. We do need research and development. I think the very important point is that, quoting from that slide, research development alone, so just increasing the amount of research and development without taking into consideration what kind of science and technology innovation we want won't solve the SDGs. And this is what we see. We see that we're very far from reaching the targets, and we see that most of the research that is done worldwide is not related to the SDGs. So you can keep increasing R&D, but if increasing R&D does not address the SDGs, then there might be actually potential for that increase in R&D, for that increase in innovation, to undermine the SDGs. And you can think of, just as an example, if you think about military innovations and inventions, they would definitely not improve the SDG 16 on peace, or even if you think about the more recent wave of AI research. AI does help in many areas, but AI can also be very unhelpful in areas, for example, in terms of increasing discrimination. So it is very important that that R&D that we think of is guided and directed towards addressing specific issues like the SDGs.
That's good, Tommaso. Thank you. And I think Cornelia and Angela's presentations also highlight that we absolutely need to have targeted, we need to develop a plan before we actually begin the STI policy development. One last question. There might be actually a few coming in the chat right now, but the question that I have here is from Anang Moma. There's a feeling that the STI process is mismatched with the SDGs. Is this really a mismatch or low capacity in harnessing STI for achieving SDGs? The 6 transition pathways for fast tracking SDGs, for example, are mostly STI based. Do we have, I don't know, Tommaso, if you wanted to give an opinion on that. Is there a mismatch between STI and SDGs? I thought there was a slide actually showing the matching up actually.
Yeah, there is definitely a mismatch, and again, the low capacity could be distributed in a way that even if there is low amount of research, is directed towards the most pressing issues related to the SDGs. If that is a decision of the country, of course, but again, SDGs seem to be relevant. But what we seem to see is even with low capacity, the specialization towards SDG-related issues is low. So what I was showing was not the capacity. What I was showing in the slide is the normalized specialization. So in relation to whatever amount of research is done in a country, it tends to be that areas which need more research are not particularly a particularly strong focus of SDG. Of STI investment, even if the investment is low.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to respond to Dimo's or Fernando's question, I do not see any raised hands. So the question and answer session that we're having right now, panel discussion, is actually from the chat question. So if you have a question, please place it in the chat, and we'll try and get it answered either now or later on by the experts here. And then a final question, I think, which might be Cornelia or Angela who could help answer. How can African countries that have low resources benefit from the Frame 3 model of the STI policy to enable them to ensure attainment of SDGs? That's from Kondwani Gondwe from Malawi. Angela, did you want to try that one?
Yes, maybe, briefly, for sure, international collaboration in this sense, it's key, not only in the sense of gaining support from different agencies or international partners, but also partnering with peers and joining efforts to collaborate with other countries that have gone through similar processes and that can share lessons learned. So for sure, this is a very first step, but crucial to start to trigger certain types of internal discussions.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Nelly, do you have any thoughts on that as well? I think partnerships are definite way to overcome some resource and capacity issues, but do you have anything else to say on that?
No, thanks, Pierre. Perhaps I can just maybe address one of the questions which was also asked in terms of inclusiveness, how policies could be more inclusive and notably taking into account the gender perspective. If you allow me, I can just also mention that this is really an important question, and there are some also focus that can be given in this area, and notably, I think when referring to the implementation of policies, what specific maybe instruments can be also designed to address gender equality, and in the design also of the STI policies, it's important since the beginning to also have a specific perspective and focus on gender. So I just wanted to mention also this common question that was raised on gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. And I want to thank everyone who's put in their questions. I haven't managed to get to all of them, and some have come in just recently. But I'm going to have to hand this back to Zhengmei. We have recorded the questions in the chats, and we'll ask the experts to take a look at them to see if they can respond to them in real time here or afterwards, to be able to give maybe a little bit of context on that. Thank you very much for all of this. Zhengmei, back to you.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, our dear panelists. We are out of time for this Q&A session, but keep in mind that we have another Q&A before the session closes, and there, if time allows, we would maybe allow participants to ask questions by taking the floor. And all right, now let's move to our next discussion. We've mentioned evidence-based policymaking several times in the discussion earlier, and for that we need better science. So Pierre will now stay with us to deliver his presentation to tell us how to bring best science and evidence into the decision-making process. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zhengmei. Just going to share some slides here. The work that we do at UNEP actually requires an awful lot of science to help decision-making. This was brought up, I think, in the context of the science diplomacy, which was discussed in the previous presentations, basically trying to communicate science to decision makers, policymakers mostly. And the idea here is that we would, the idea here is that many of these policy areas that we're talking about require not necessarily a lot of research and development, but synthesis of existing science for decision makers. So I'll speak about how science can be used in this helpful way. First of all, these, especially on the environment, these are complex and systemic challenges that have a lot of policy implications. And so they have implications on human health, planetary health, of course, resource demands. And so these environmental challenges are very important to have good science and good evidence behind them when the policies are developed, because they will impact a large quantity of people. These policies will have economic and social impacts that could be positive or negative, positive in the long term, negative in the short term, perhaps. And so you have to really think through the whole policy development process, and that requires good evidence and good science behind it. As I said, these environmental problems are usually problems of collective action. People are overusing resources, overusing the environment in a way that is affecting the planet negatively and ultimately human populations negatively. And therefore, the solutions require collective action. We can think of climate change, for example, as one of the very large environmental problems that requires basically global action by every single country at some point, either to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or to have resilience and adaptation strategies to be able to deal with the impacts of climate change. I'm just going to give an example here of energy demand, global energy demand, which was brought up in Geo6. The science that we have helps us define the problem. We can know what the trends are for energy demand in the past, and we can project them out into the future. That helps us identify the what is the challenge that we are facing, and by when. So it gives us a sense of what is going to happen. That will help us maybe formulate the policy question. In this particular slide, I'm just going to show that obviously in the Geo6, we identified that energy demand between now and 2050 is expected to grow by 50 to 60% globally. And we're actually, because of climate change, because of air pollution and other challenges related to energy use, we have to reduce emissions related to that energy demand significantly to be able to make sure that that we don't continue to harm the environment in the way that we have. And so there are a number of ways that you could do that, but broadly, the two ways that have been proposed in the Geo6 are to reduce energy demand growth by bringing in an awful lot more energy efficiency. That's the use of LED light bulbs and other types of technologies that can help us reduce energy demand. There are also end-use demand policies in place that can help reduce that. And of course, we want to decarbonize the rest of the remaining energy mix to be able to get down to a level of emissions that will not continue to harm the environment. The challenge that we have is that those are broadly what questions. This is what we would need to do. But assessments now and analysis are actually delving into how to do it by bringing in social scientists, economic analysis, and other types of knowledge to be able to help us move into this how question, or to answer how to do this. We also need to bring in different affected groups to help us answer that how question, because how you bring in energy efficiency or decarbonize will affect different groups in different ways. And of course, we want to create partnerships for the implementation. We need to partner with private sector, societals. We need to have municipal governments involved so that we can have actions that will actually help us prepare policies that are acceptable to everyone. And of course, in doing the science that would support these what and how questions, what is needed and how can we do it, we need assessments, or we need science that is considered legitimate, politically legitimate by the decision makers. We need the science to address the specific challenges that those decision makers are asking. So that's the relevance question or the salience question. So it has to be targeted to what those decision makers are asking. And of course, we have to maintain scientific credibility throughout the process. We need to, of course, do this because policymakers typically speak a different language than scientists, and we need to be able to communicate the objectives and the solutions in a way that policymakers will be able to accept them. They also have different needs when producing science for decision making. We may be focused on a very, very specific issue, and the analysis needs to be very, very targeted. Or it might be a broader issue that needs to bring in science from various different sources. And as I said, the policymakers need the science to be relevant and salient and address their policy problem directly. This science hopefully can also encourage collective action and therefore must be viewed as legitimate. Independent views that are geographically and gender balanced also need to be considered. And scientists must be seen to produce evidence that has been credible throughout the process of producing that science. Also, we need science that can both inform policy, but also bring us towards proper actions. So the science that we typically do at UNEP are assessments, reviews, and analysis. We have governments that provide us with resolutions and decisions to be able to ask for that science, and we engage with a large academic community to be able to produce that science. But there's also the R&D that we're discussing in the previous presentations that help us produce patents, standards, and specific technologies that help move the action into the solutions into direct action. Policy can also help action by creating goals, regulations, incentives, and economic measures. And action can then report back to policymakers on effectiveness and different program evaluations. So there's quite a lot of interaction across the science policy action dynamic. And depending on whether there's a lot of government initiative and government willingness to act, you might want to be producing science that is more policy focused. If there's less initiative and less willingness to act, the science might actually move much more towards direct action. And of course, as I said, we typically engage with large groups of academics and other scientists to be able to bring this science to decision makers. We have, of course, empirical scientists that give us a lot of information on the state of the environment. We have social scientists who help us with the policy questions. Of course, we have different interpretations across different groups of scientists, so we undergo peer reviews, and we bring in larger groups through the peer reviews to be able to assess whether the science is credible and legitimate and relevant. And we need to reconcile the science from different published literature. We have to be able to understand the uncertainties and the different opinions in that literature. And we have to assess existing literature. We're not producing new science when we do these assessments. We want to create a compelling narrative that policymakers will understand. So this typically is not a scientific paper or a review. It's actually a narrative that will explain things to decision makers. And of course, we want to be able to communicate to various different types of learners. So we have a lot of graphics and maps and multimedia and data that actually would inform the narrative. So that's the type of science that we are doing at UNEP. And I think I'm happy to take questions during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for this presentation and shares UNEP's perspectives on the criteria to produce better science for decision making. And participants, please don't forget to continue sending your questions in the chat for another Q&A session. And this is your chance to steer the discussions towards the matters that are most important to you. All right, let's now move to the next presentation. So far, we've heard several key principles and good practices for effective STI policymaking, and some participants have also raised important questions about policy capacities. So now let's look at what types of capacities are needed by looking at the UNIDO tool for identifying policy capacity gaps. And this presentation will be from Christoph Hammer, Industrial Policy Analyst at UNIDO's Division of Industrial Policy Advice and Capacity Development. He has been supporting governments in different stages of industrial policymaking for over 6 years. He holds a master's degree in economics. Christoph, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. Hello to everybody. Greetings from Vienna, Austria. Let me share my slides. So Today I will talk about a tool we have used and developed, which is called the policy gap or policy capacity gap analysis. And before I go into this tool, I want to maybe give a little bit of context and relate industrial policy to STI, because I come from an industrial policy background, while the topic here is mostly STI. So just a few words on that. So for us, industrial policy is any government intervention that is aimed at changing the structure of the economy, but not in any direction, but particularly with a focus on an increased technologically complex activities to enhance the performance. So this is already the first connection between technology and industrial policy. We know that most of innovation comes from the manufacturing sector. So manufacturing firms are typically the ones at the core of innovation, and they are the ones producing the bulk of new improved products and processes. And these are the things that are typically the things that drive growth, employment, and incomes, and other SDG-related goals. Now, related to this, I would say that industrial innovation policy is now then the field where it targets a stronger connection between actually the production structures, so industry, and STI systems to produce these goods and services more aligned to the development goals. So just a few words on putting this into context. Although most of what I'm talking about today, this methodology and the case study, is more content agnostic, I would say. So it's valid for all kinds of policies. So let me connect, since the theme today is also the SDGs, let me connect what I'm talking about to the SDGs. So we will take a look at the policy cycle again in a minute, and we've seen it before in session 1, but there are lots of policy making capacities needed. In policy making, in my case, I'm talking about industrial policy making. And what do we want to achieve with that? So industrial policies eventually want to achieve behavioral change from the private sector mostly, which is influenced by all kinds of things. And this behavioral change then eventually should contribute to the SDGs in the form of growth, employment, etc. So you see, when there's something wrong or underdeveloped or missing in terms of policymaking capacities, it can trickle down all the way through inadequate policies, missing policies, etc., to a lack of behavioral change, and then a lack of change in the SDGs. In UNIDO, we mostly focus on SDG 9. So let me talk about these capacities, and maybe just as a quick reminder, and you have seen this now in almost every presentation in some form, the policy cycle, which consists of many different stages. So let's say first stage, or one of the first stages, is agenda setting. So we convert problems into goals and proposals, but for that, of course, you need a lot of analysis and data. So think about what Pierre said, for example. You need research, data, and you need to understand the policy landscape, etc., to formulate goals and proposals that are evidence-based. Then we have the entire part of strategy and policy formulation. We sometimes distinguish strategies and policies. For us, strategies mean the medium long-term overall goals. Policies are then the more detailed versions. So at this stage of the policy-making process, so problems, suggestions, demands need to be transformed into programs or projects. At this stage, you also need to select all the policy instruments. So do we use subsidies? Do we use tax breaks, etc.? The implementation stage is then really taking the action. So we want to make the things happen, not just create a nice policy document, but actually implement all these projects. And while doing that, we have monitoring and evaluation going on. So we monitor the progress of policies, the implementation. Eventually, we also want to understand what worked, what didn't work. So this is the evaluation part. And if you look at all these steps that also most of my colleagues before mentioned, the question is then, okay, this is all related to a lot of different capacities. So let me show you a way of thinking about these capacities. And what I will then present is a way of assessing these capacities. So the question is really, It's good to know all these steps, but is your government able to conduct actually all these steps? Do you have these capacities? So when we think of these capacities, we can think of this 3x3 matrix. So these are analytical skills and competencies, operational skills, and political skills. And these different skills need to be present on the individual level. So let's think one politician, one bureaucrat, one policymaker. They need to be present at the organizational level. So very often here we mean a ministry, whoever is the agent making the policy, and on the system level. And to some extent, all the colleagues before mentioned some of these, but let me give you some examples what we mean here. So if you think about analytical levels, skills on the individual level, so these are general research analytical skills, skills in evidence-based policy analysis, access to data, for example. If you think about operational skills, so this has to do with project management, but also leadership in policy making. So here we mean people, for example, in the ministries. But you also need to have a knowledge about all these different steps of policy making process, from the analysis to the designing a policy to monitoring implementation. But also political capacities are needed. Think about networking skills, communication skills, negotiation of policies. You need to have the skills to negotiate policies with all the stakeholders, etc. When we think about these skills on the organizational level, so for example, on the ministry level, you need a lot of people with analytical skills. You need processes and systems to collect data, to disseminate data. There also needs to be things like a commitment to evidence-based policymaking. Not every country shows a commitment to using data in everything they do. I think it's more and more so, but it's not guaranteed. But you also have things like you might want to have a team of people who can fulfill this industrial intelligence function, for example, or very important, an intra-ministerial coordination. So these are skills that are day-to-day relevant when institutions work together. And you can think of all these other skills. I don't want to go into all of these. We will share the material. You can, I think, also rewatch a recording of all of this. But let me get to the case study. So why do we think these are relevant? Well, if some of these capacities are underdeveloped or missing, this might lead to, first of all, an inability to identify the right priorities. So if you want to set priorities, if you want to understand what the focus of your policy should be, you need the skill to translate data into some findings. It might, very often we see policies that have unrealistic policy goals. It's good to have ambitious goals, but if you look at evidence and data, sometimes it's very clear that policy goals that are set in the current policy are unrealistic. But underdeveloped capacities can also lead to funding gaps, or, for example, to a lack of trust and buy-in from beneficiaries and stakeholders. So if you lack this political and operational skill to talk and negotiate with your stakeholders, this might lead to a lack of trust, for example. There might also happen political capture, so meaning that the goals of the policies and the policy instruments and budgets are not used to achieve the best goals and eventually the SDGs, but political actors capture some of these funds and the process. You might also, underdeveloped capacities might also lead to no progress in implementation. So if you might be able to produce your own policy document, but then nothing happens with it. Very often we see that if countries buy their policies from somewhere else, so let them write from some external agency, for example, that then there's no progress in implementation. But an underdeveloped capacity in everything that has to do with M&E might lead to weak or non-existing learning effects and evaluation. So you don't know what's actually working, what's not working. There are no feedback loops, no learning effects. And just to name a few, and all of this means, of course, slow industrial development. and therefore slow progress towards the SDGs. So this is why we care for these capacities. And what I want to show you now is a way of assessing this with a case study. So basically, it's a tool we call policy capacity gap analysis, which is based on this 3x3 matrix that I showed you. And this methodology is based on interviews and focus group discussions. So here we talk about qualitative work, not quantitative analysis. Not only do we use interviews and focus group discussions, but we also try to do desk research to see if the findings are in line with with things that have been found before, and how things also changed over time. Now, what do you use this analysis for? Well, first of all, it's a feedback mechanism for the governments, so they understand what are their strengths and weaknesses. And second of all, it's helpful for organizations like UNIDO and the other UN organizations to develop capacity development projects. So we understand where the gaps really are, what are the biggest missing pieces, where can we come and develop these capacities. So let me show you one example of this capacity gap analysis. This was done in a North African country. I cannot name the country because these kinds of analyses are basically showing what the government is not so good at. So they are typically want anonymity. We used interviews and focus group discussions, as I mentioned, with individuals from ministries, active and non-active individuals. We also interviewed people from other public authorities that are related to ministries. We talked to the private sector, we talked to academia. So to get really a big picture of what people think are the things that are missing or underdeveloped. And we also, as I said, used desk research to further validate the findings. So I will just give you now the 3 big blocks of capacities and what things were named most often as a problem or bottleneck or challenge. So looking at analytical capacities, things that were named most often were a lack of individuals with data analysis skills. That's good if you want to use evidence in policymaking, but you also need people who can do that. So that was one thing. And here we talk about individuals in the government with data analysis skills. The second point was that there's no systematic way of data collection and storing for the use of policymakers. So yes, there's a statistical office of the country, but to many people it is unclear what is collected, how it is stored, how it can be accessed. So there's also a lot of information asymmetry about how to get this data and if this is, if it's recent data, if the data quality is fine, etc. A lack of an M&E framework was named also very often. Of course, these things are related. If you have too few people with data analysis skills and no systematic data collection, then it's also very hard to do monitoring, and especially evaluation. So the lack of an M&E framework was also named as a big bottleneck. On the operational capacities, things that were named most often were problems with coordination within ministries, so that different units, departments, directorates don't work well enough together. I think everybody here has some experience with that, no matter where they work. What was also mentioned a lot was unclear rules and overlaps in mandates. So for some policy areas, it was unclear who should really do it, who is responsible for the design of it, who is responsible for the implementation, where to draw the lines, etc. A third thing that was mentioned a lot was a lack of results-based management skills. So let's call it modern project management skills and a lack of having results at everything that people are supposed to do and what actually the goals should be. Related to that, a lack of knowledge of the, in our case, industrial policymaking process. So what does it take to get from data to a policy and then how to actually monitor it? Some of these aspects will be discussed in the case of STI in the next sessions, as I understand. But also collaboration with the private sector. And this was not only named by the private sector as a problem. And my colleagues before mentioned the need to engage with stakeholders, and this typically comes up. Lastly, on the political capacities, what was named most often was that there are too few politicians and bureaucrats that drive and promote the policy process. So very often it is the politicians and ministers that need to have certain political skills to drive the process, to promote it, and to make it an important topic politically, which is equally important than some of the other things. And related to that, there should be a long-term and a short-term vision of what the country wants to achieve. If this is not present, also the people in ministries, the private sector, is always unclear what really the goals are. So what are the main takeaways from all of that? Well, first of all, we would say, and I think you might agree, that industrial or innovation policymaking is a complex process, and it requires many different capacities from all the things that we mentioned so far, also what my colleagues before mentioned. So we talk about analytical capacities, operational capacities, political skills that need to be there on the individual level, organizational level, and the ecosystem level. This policy capacity gap analysis is one methodology of assessing that, and which helps also to understand what kind of capacities are lacking. Very often also helps to understand if policies are not working. You can use the findings from these kinds of analyses to get a first idea what might be missing. And having this clearer picture of what is missing or underdeveloped can also be an important starting point to develop capacities, understand why things are not working. Now, what I want to know from you now is what the situation is in your country. And I'm asking, please, my colleague Min, to share again the Mentimeter slides. And there we're asking you what kind of capacities you think are most missing in your country. And we made a small selection of 9 topics. So if you want to go to this Mentimeter again. So the first are really about more analytics. So there are not enough data analysts. Data is a problem, or maybe it's no awareness that data can be useful for the policymaking process. Is problem more on the coordination side. So there's not enough coordination within the ministry or across the government, or is it the private sector is not really involved enough? Or is it on the political side? You have a document, there is maybe some implementation, but there is not enough political support to drive the process. Or maybe the private sector is not really committed. Okay, so we have 8 respondents now, 10, 11. I want to wait a little bit to make it more representative. But okay, one point that clearly comes out is not enough data analysts. So it's this is really a matter of technical skills. But related to that, of course, also data is not collected or of insufficient quality. Sometimes this goes hand in hand. Yes, a lack of coordination with the private sector and other stakeholders. I think this is very much in line with also what my colleagues before said, and I'm pretty sure this will come up again in later discussions. What else do we have? Coordination across government. Yeah, so I think if I look at these results, this is more or less in line with what we found in our case study that I showed you. It seems to be similar things that need further development. Great. Thank you so much. If you have other questions, I will also check the chat later, also my colleagues from UNIDO that are here. But with that, I hand back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you so much for this very important topic on policy capacity. Excuse me. You remind us that for policy to truly deliver their goals, we need to invest and also assess policy capacities and at different levels. And I believe this UNITO model is very important in assessing STI policy capacities. And we will also discuss some of the levels in the next sessions. For instance, at the operational level, we will discuss the design and implementation of STI policy instruments or STI programs in session 2. Okay, great. Now we've heard many important aspects in STI policy making for the SDGs. Now let's move to some real world experience to hear some regional perspectives. And we will hear 2 presentations on the ground to see concrete regional experience in the development or implementation of STI policy frameworks. And one of the framework is the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa, or simply as STISA 2034, adopted by the African Union in February 2025. And this presentation will be delivered by Dr. Conte Almami, who is an experienced STI policy specialist with over 15 years of experience in Africa, former senior expert in Innovation Point, acting director at the African Union African Observatory for STI. He supports evidence-based policymaking and capacity building. Dr. Conte, you can now take the floor. Right.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Great.
So I will wait.
Yes,
I'm
we
sharing
hear you.
I'm sharing my slide. No, can you see
we
my
see your
screen?
desktop.
My desktop. Okay. So I think that I need to open my. Sorry. Okay, the slide is here.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
And then it's okay. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to present the development of STIDA. Also, the Mahlet this year could be really able to present this topic as she led at this one part of the processes. I'm glad also to meet Tommaso and Emit and also Cornelia. So I'm going to make this presentation on the development of STISA because I had the opportunity at least to participate to the whole process. Maybe that's why I can be able to present the development of the STISA. As you know, I think that the presentation coming from Cornelia shows the policy cycle. And then the STISA development, in fact, respects this development process. There is firstly a review of STISA 2024, the former one, the first 10-year plan. As you know, Agenda 2063 is a 50-year, which is implemented through 5 10-year plan with regard to the sectors. And then the first strategy was the STISA 2024. And then we did a review of that one in, I think, end of 2023. And then there is an agenda setting which make a team then to draft the STISA now, the one I'm going to talk maybe in less than 10 minutes. And then there is an adoption of that. And then after a planning for that, you know, there is, in fact, a shift there. We have the review phases, or drafting phases, followed by adoption, and now after planning, then to have an operational plan for STISA 2030. And then to shape that strategic plan, we base on the review recommendation coming from the former STISA. And the key recommendations are based on the design process of the STISA and the relevance and coverage of the STISA 2024 and the governance, funding, STI, domestication, and all these elements you can see on your left are our base line of, when I can't type baseline because I can say that these are the main elements that that shape the new STISA. And then based on that recommendation, we see that in STISA 2034, there is a need of inclusiveness. And then it is also a guidance of the task force. I will talk about the task force after. And then there is a need also to align with the second 10-year implementation plan. As I say, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, is then implemented through 5 strategic 10-year plan. And then the 10-year implementation plan is the one who cover all the, what I can say, priority, the sectors of the Agenda 2063. STISA is only the STI segment. And then that also new framework should build up on the AU sectoral frameworks. As you know, there are many frameworks at the African Union level, which is CADAP in agriculture, PIDA in infrastructure. You know, many frameworks are in have been implemented at the AU level. And then, of course, the SDG to be in fact aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. There is also another recommendation which give us to put a theory of change and impact pathways for this new STISA. And also to emphasize on the science diplomacy and partnerships. I think that we talked about collaboration and all the importance of collaboration and so on. Here, that part, there is a new strategy plan. And then also talk about frontier or emerging technology, about infrastructure, all these elements which are related to really science and technology. And last but not least, the implementation pathway. And then when I took the former one, you know, if you see here, the former one, there is no implementation plan for STISA 2024. There is many tentatives, but we do not have really planning documents for how to implement the STISA, even if it is in the document, but there is no, in fact, an operational one. That's why for this new one, there is an implementation plan, which is under drafting and will finish maybe soon. And then you have, in fact, here is for STISA development process. I think that there is a task force and also a drafting team, and there is, in fact, meeting in person and also virtual meetings. Therefore, it was really a hybrid mode, combining. Sorry, there is a noise in my. And there is then combining modes. Then there is, in fact, in-person meeting and also a virtual meeting. But what is interesting is here, it is the establishment of a task force who gave guidance to the drafting team. And then there is many meetings between the task force and the drafting team. And then the drafting team, I think, met 3 times in person. And then the task force also met 2 times, and there are several weekly online meetings. And adoption will be taken in '25. Then through the and so on, all the process of the aid before adoption. And then after, we are now on the implementation plan drafting stage. Then we just met, I think, 3 weeks ago to finalize a little bit the draft plan. And then I hope that at the end of the May, the operational plan will be available. And what is new here is that we have now also an estimated budget, because it's important here for strategy to have at least a bit of budget. And then even if it is not, well, what I'm saying is not maybe huge or not very important, but it is important then to have an estimated budget. This is, in fact, in the new drafting plan. So here it's just to show that there is an participatory multi-stakeholder process. And then there is a representative from AU member state, from REX, regional economic communities, STI institution, academia, UN agencies, SDGs. So many of these stakeholders have participated to the drafting process of CSR 2034. I was there as expert because just leaving AU, but there is also the ST Secretariat led by Mahlet. Mahlet is the one who really lead. I think that I will leave many times for her to maybe give more details about the process of the STISA 2034. And then I just try to finish that there is this slide shows the impact pathways. And then the strategic intervention are divided in two clusters. There is a priority sectors, and there is a cross-cutting. So one which is a sectorial, as a cross-cutting, that what is very connected to science, technology, and innovation. The priority one is the one you can find really in the 10-year plan. These are the 5 priority with agriculture, health, ICT, energy, and environment. And here we align with also their policies, their strategies, their 10-year, because for agriculture, you can have CADAP there. We just try to, what I can align with their intervention related to science and technology. Then we did it for all other priority, health, ICT, energy, and environment. And then there is another cluster of intervention, which is really focusing on science, technology, and innovation. The one is science technology is a cross-cutting, the one we call cross-cutting. And then there is 6 axes. One is promoting STI for a sustainable and inclusive industrialization. As you know, then this is a little bit one of the main challenges of Africa to industrialize, in fact, this economy. In general, we are really a very low level of industrialization, and then a lot of EU member states have now the priority to industrialize, in fact, to diversify the economy, because our economy is mostly on oriented services and really natural resources. And there is no really technology development for industrialization. And then there is also the human capital, infrastructure and skills, which is really another element which is linked to Agenda even to 2063. You have another block of frontier and emerging technology. Secondly, fourthly, the science, diplomacy, and partnership. And I think that I talked about that, the science, diplomacy, and partnership. You have also the private sector engagement. This is what is also really a challenge for many African countries to engage private sector in the STI activities. They are in innovation activity, sure, but mostly on R&D activity. R&D is mostly conducted by public institutions, and then private sector are not well involved. And then you have also the last part, which is the youth and gender engagement. And youth is very important as they are mostly more, what I can say, they are representing more than 50% of the population in Africa. Therefore, taking into account this forces is very important in the new STISA 2034. So this is a little bit the two cluster of strategic intervention we have. And then if implemented, we hope that to accelerate Africa transition to a knowledge-based and innovation-led socio-economic development. Because that this is very important as impacts now to have an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by competitive science, technology, and innovation. Thank you. I think that I try to do it in 7 or 8 minutes, and I thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I am a Francophone. I am sorry for my bad English and my accent. Up to you.
Merci, thank you very much, Dr. Almamy Conte. Your presentation is perfect, and thanks for walking us through this policy development process and also sharing some concrete examples of some of the key principles that we mentioned in previous presentations, such as multi-stakeholder participatory approach, cross-cutting approach, and also you demonstrate how the learning process brings the development of an implementation plan for STISA 2034. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to see if Mrs. Marley is still with us, and if you'd like to add a few comments to this presentation.
Certainly. Zhengmei, can you see my slide?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so perhaps I should quickly try to put it in presentation mode. And I think on my side, Dr. Almamy Conte, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you really for covering the grounds quite well. There is not really much to add except for the purpose of this training, maybe to indicate the key value additions that STISA 2034 is bringing to the forum. I think Dr. Conte had spoken about the guidance that was received from the task force, which was very broad in its composition. We had academia, we had the RECs, we had member states, and a very inclusive nature was incorporated in the sort of format of the guidance that was received in developing the priority areas of the strategy itself, but also to structure and to present the strategy as you see it now. Dr. Conte also mentioned that the premises was based on the recommendations that were drawn from implementation of the previous STISA, so the STISA 2024, and we built on the successes and the challenges that were faced during the implementation of STISA 2024. With regards to aligning with the broader Agenda 2063, Agenda 2063 was used as a broader framework, and more specifically the moonshots, or what we call the aspirations of the second decade, and the catalytic interventions as they relate to STI were mapped out and drawn, which really informed the kind of sectorial frameworks we will be looking into. Dr. Conte mentioned the 5 priority sectors. So those were drawn in from a look at the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063, zooming into the 5 priority sectors. STISA 2034 recognized that the 6 strategic priorities that Dr. Conte identified, or he also mentioned, we refer to them as the cross-cutting priorities. would be interconnected in nature, creating synergies across these 5 sectors: agriculture, health, ICT, energy, and environment. So the impact pathway is really formulated around that philosophy towards advancements in one sector, positively impacting others, really fostering a holistic approach to its development. So this was, by and large, the philosophy around the theory of change as incorporated in STISA 2034. I think Dr. Conte also mentioned that the emphasis was made on science policy and diplomacy. Partnerships also given due recognition with bringing on board the private sector and youth engagements. And with regards to the governance and implementation modalities, that was by and large also lacking in the previous strategy. So we have incorporated huge focus on the governance structure, and this will also eventually be articulated in the implementation plan that Dr. Conte mentioned we're working on. Yes, and finally, we have also incorporated into the focus on the strategic priorities, frontier technologies, human capital and infrastructures and skills building as part of the priorities that STISA will focus on. I think this is just to maybe quickly show the 5 priorities as we had discussed with Dr. Conte's engagement. And these are the STI strategic priorities, the 6 of them that STISA will now be building on. I think I will not like to take more of the time of colleagues, but if you have any questions, we're both here to address them. And I will also share the STISA on the group chat. We are still formatting and making the final edits for the publications, but I think it could be shared for your reference. Thank you. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mahali, for sharing these key features and priorities. And we're so happy to see that we see alignment with the Agenda 2063, the AU sectoral frameworks and SDGs. And we really wish you all the best with the successful implementation of this STISA 2034, and hope we'll have another chance to invite you to more on it in another occasion. And speaking of implementation, I'd like to invite our next speaker to share experience on the implementation of the STEDIC STI policy protocol as a transition to our next session. And this presentation will be delivered by Rioboka Marakabi, an acting senior program officer responsible for science, technology, and innovation at the Directorate of Industrial Development and Trade of Southern African Development Community. He's responsible for facilitation and coordination of policy planning, programming, monitoring, and evaluation in order to harness STI in support of industrial development and regional integration. And before I pass the floor, I see some colleagues are asking how to receive support from our team. And if you are interested in collaboration and seek support, please contact us through our email posted on our website, and the link to this website will be posted by our colleagues in the link. And now I'll pass the floor to Mrs. Rioboka. The floor is yours. We can see your slides.
You can see my slides? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much once again. My name is Rioboka Marakabi, Acting Senior Program Officer responsible for Science and Technology at the SADC Secretariat. This presentation, I'm going to share with you the implementation on the SADC Protocol on Science, Technology, and Innovation. We have done the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting framework, which of course assists us to evaluate the implementation progress at the national level and both at the regional level. So I'm just going to quickly go through my slides because the time allocated is very short, so I have to be quick. We at the SADC Secretariat, we are guided by different policy and instruments. The first instrument that is guiding us is the SADC Treaty, which of course emphasizes on promoting the development and transfer of technology, which is one of the 10 objectives of the SADC. Then we have the SADC Vision 2050, which envisions that by 2050, SADC is to be an industrialized and integrated region. Then we have the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, and one of its outcomes is enhanced regional technological capability and capacity through science, technology, and innovation. Today, we're going to focus on the implementation of the protocol, which is one of the guiding instruments in promoting STI in the region. So the main objective of the protocol on science, technology, and innovation is to foster cooperation and promote the development, transfer, and mastery of STI in member states. And we have, I think it is wise to share with you the policy frameworks and legal instruments that we have in the region. I've already talked about the protocol on science, technology, and innovation, which was developed in 2008 and it entered into force in 2017. We have the SADC Charter, establishing the Women in Science, Engineering, and Technology Organization. And on this charter, we only have 5 member states which have started establishing their national chapters. Because to have this organization, we need most of the member states to have national chapters. So we only have 5 member states that have established the national chapters for women and technology. We have the SADC Strategic Plan on Science, Technology, and Innovation. We have the SADC Cyber Infrastructure Framework. We have SADC Science, Technology, and Innovation Implementation Framework to support climate change. We have SADC Innovation and Technology Transfer Framework and Action Plan. We have SADC Intellectual Property Framework, SADC Guidelines and Framework on Regional Centers of Excellence and Centers of Specialization. We have SADC Monitoring, Evaluation, and Reporting Framework on Protocol on Science, Technology, and Innovation. We have SADC STI Policy Training Framework. We have the MOU with UNESCO. We have MOU with African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. We are also guided by African Union Agenda 2063 and STISA. Hello. Okay. So we to assess the implementation of the protocol, we came up with 9 outcomes. The first outcome was looking at the development and harmonization of STI policies in the region. And we developed some indicators to assess the implementation in relation to STI policies. So the first indicator was looking at the number of member states that have signed the protocol. Of course, all the member states, SADC member states, they have signed the protocol, but only 14 of them have ratified the protocol. The other indicator was mainly looking at the number of member states with approved science, technology, and innovation policies. All member states at the SADC region, they have the policies on science, technology, and innovation. So this is the policy landscape as far as STI is concerned. I'll quickly move to the next slide. Then this is the status of ratification. You see Angola has succeeded in 2021 and so forth. So these are the member states that have ratified. The only member state that is missing is Madagascar, which has not ratified the protocol yet. Now, the outcome 2 is looking at the increasing the resources for scientific research. So here we are looking at the resources that are directed to the science, technology, and innovation at the member states level. So the indicator, the one indicator is looking at the percentage of national budget allocated to entities responsible for STI. But for this indicator, it was very difficult to make the analysis, as most member states did not report on it. So we thought maybe it is important that we do further engagements with the member states to get the value of this indicator. So the other indicator was number of approved policies to attract the public-private partnerships. And in this one, a few of the member states, they do have PPPs policies, but they are not specific to science, technology, and innovation, except for Malawi, which reported that its PPP policies, they have some which are related to STI. So the other issue is on the cross-domestic expenditure on research and development. I will share this is the slide which shows that all the SADC member states have not been able to reach the 1% target of investing in research and development. So you'll see that South Africa has 0.6, which is the highest, 0.61, according to the latest data that we got from the member state. So the lowest one is 0.01 by Madagascar. So you will see that as far as the cross-domestic expenditure on research and development as a percentage of GDP, we are way below the target that was set by the African Union for 1%. Then we have outcome 4, which is looking at the protection. We are talking about intellectual property here. All member states, they do have legislations or policies or strategies on intellectual property rights. And so we also look at the number of institutions that are providing IPR services and also the return on investment from intellectual property. But most member states do not typically publish national figures specifically indicating the revenue generated from intellectual property transactions. So we also look at the number of patents applications that are recorded at the member states level. Yes, all the member states, they do have this data except for Seychelles because they have Seychelles do not have a dedicated patent office. So that is why that data was missing. These are the figures that we were looking at in terms of the reports that we got from the member states. So this was the number of patent applications submitted in the past 3 years. So you will see that most member states, the total applications are high, but as for the issued patents, you'll see that they are very low. So that is something that we will try to maybe engage the member states and see how we can capacitate them as far as issues of patents are concerned. So here is the outcome number 5, which looks at improving institutional capacity in research and technology institutions in the region. Here we had a number of indicators. One indicator was looking at the number of member states with human capital development policies, strategies, and framework So only Angola, Botswana, DRC, Malawi, Namibia, and South Africa were able to report on this indicator. Number of member states with capacity building programs or initiatives in STI. Yeah, only 8 member states were able to report on this, which is a good indicator. Number of experienced scientists in the diaspora participating in regional STI programs. Angola, DRC, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Seychelles, and Tanzania were able to report on this indicator. But let me just move quickly. Here we are talking about the number of personnel in research and development. So Angola reported 297, while Botswana reported 1,716. Democratic Republic of South Africa, of Congo, reported 2,876. Eswatini 204. Lesotho 129. We had Madagascar also, which reported 2,138. Malawi 2,829. Then we didn't have the data from Mauritius and Mozambique. Then Namibia reported 1,132, Seychelles 442. We have South Africa 42,925, and so forth, and other member states. Then we have outcome 6, which was looking at increasing access to and increasing access to and quality in teaching and learning of basic science. So here we are focusing on STEM programs that member states have. So we were looking at one indicator was looking at the cross-annual enrollment ratio in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So information to compute the cross-annual enrollment ratio in STEM is available in higher education institutions, but issues exist with compilation. So we need to maybe provide capacity in terms of how they can compile this data at the member states level. So we also looking at the percentage of teachers in STEM. Data to estimate the percentage of teachers in STEM is not readily available in a number of member states. So this is something that we also try to focus on so that we can have a reliable indicator for this particular data. So I'll just go to outcome number 7. This one focuses on gender equity and equality. So remember when I introduced the policies that we had, we talked about the Charter on Women in Science. So here with most member states, they have STI policies and programs that encourage the promotion and participation of women in STEM. But there is another indicator which has a challenge. The indicator is on percentage of boys and girls, secondary school leavers who achieved A or C grades in STEM subject. So the data here is missing. So we're still going to see how we can assist the member states in terms of having this kind of data. Other than that,
Rebecca, sorry to jump in. For the interest of time, would you mind wrapping up a little bit on this part on indicator and maybe tell participants a little bit about how maybe different countries and institutions are involved in this policymaking process, and share with us some good practices, as we'll have another session on monitoring and evaluation. Here, maybe tell us a little bit more about the engagement of different member states, if you can.
Yeah, therefore, thank you for that. Yes. Now we have different structures at in the SADC region, policy structures. So there will be technical committees, then we have the ministerial, we have senior officials, then we have the ministerial meetings, which of course approve some of our policies. So like, for instance, now we are in the process of reviewing the protocol on science because it was developed in 2008. So now we think it is the right time since STISA has been reviewed, so we can review the protocol from our side so that it can align well with STISA and other SDG goals. So what we do, we call for regional meetings if we want to review this kind of policies, because these policies are for the member states. So we engage them, we call all the member states to look at the articles, because there are some articles inside the protocol itself, and to see how we can maybe modify them, those articles, or maybe come up with new ones, depending on the changes that are happening. Now we have issues of AI. The previous protocol didn't have anything that has to do with artificial intelligence. So it's the member states that we bring together. After we bring together the member states, we go to the committee of senior officials, which will look at the document and see if they have to approve or maybe recommend to the ministers who are responsible for science, technology, and innovation to approve some of the changes that have been made on the protocol. Then it will go until it reaches the Council of Ministers. Yes, those are the processes that we take.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing this experience of bringing different member states for this joint implementation process, and sharing with us how the implementation will be also in line with the STISA 2034 and the SDGs. And this gives us a good sense of how the regional frameworks can work hand in hand and reinforcing one another. Thank you so much, Ryoboke, and we also invite you to maybe join us in session 3 and interact with the participants on the monitoring and evaluation part. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be moving into the Q&A session, and I'll give the floor again to Pierre for this part.
Thank you very much, Zhengmei. It's been very interesting to hear all of these presentations, specifically on the regional efforts on STI policy. So that's great to know that there is work going on there. I wanted to perhaps, and I'm not sure if I can target this directly to Dr. Conte. The first question is, to what extent do you think STISA 2024, 2034, I guess, 2024 was implemented across the continent? Do you have any metrics and an evaluation report? What mechanisms are incorporated into the revised draft to improve implementation? Do you have any insights into the performance of the previous STISA? Dr. Conte, do you have something to provide there as an answer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Boileau.
Merci, Monsieur
I
Conte.
think that I think that maybe Marlet may complete also that question.
Okay.
As I said in my presentation, there is a review of STISA, and then that document, the document I think is with EST department, and then in that department, the methodology used and how to assess this inside, and then also all the findings. But if we look at the level of implementation of STISA 2024, is a little bit very difficult to say at the level of implementation at national, regional. But what we can say is that it has influenced a little bit the development of STI policy in the region. There is also it was taken as a framework, because I said there is no dedicated funding mechanism for STISA, and there is no flagship programs. Therefore, you cannot, what I can say, evaluate, assess its performance, because of the lack of flagship programs, lack of dedicated funds, lack of instruments. And so also there is also the low level of engagement in the design and implementation process. This is at least what the findings show. There is, in fact, these are some of the elements I can give. And then if maybe Mahlet can complete what I said, and then if also the document is available for, because it is an internal use, I don't know if it is in the public domain. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Kebede?
Thank you, Dr. Conte. I think you've covered the grounds again very well. I've just shared the review report to colleagues in the chat. Yeah, I mean, you've said it. It's the findings were very thorough from the design process of STISA 2024 to whether or not the relevance of the priorities and the missions of STISA 2024 still applied now. You've said the governance and coordination mechanisms were also articulated. What were the shortcomings and the challenges that member states and the STI community faced with regards to coordinating their initiatives to implement the continental strategy? That was also articulated. Yeah, I think you've really pronounced yourself very well in that, but yeah, I think I've also managed to share the document with colleagues so they can have a closer look. And all of the clusters of the findings had been incorporated into the new strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other broad question that has come in through the chat is on science diplomacy. Is there a science diplomacy effort across Africa? Is there capacity building for science diplomacy? I know of a few efforts under multilateral environmental agreements that help train different diplomats who participate in the climate change discussions and the biodiversity discussions, to help them understand how the science and the policy fit together. I also know of the EU Alliance on Science Diplomacy, which does some capacity building, but I wondered if either Dr. Conte or Ms. Kebede would want to speak to that.
Yes, I will be very happy to speak about that. And then I remember 10 years ago, I was what I can say, used as a resource person for ESCO to build capacity of some African countries on science diplomacy. And we did it in the West African countries many times. A little bit our STI, where I was in fact doing this capacity building, but it was not very well extended in the whole continent. But I did at least 1 year or 2 years of building capacity on science diplomacy. Of maybe we went to Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, etc. And then we were also doing capacity building for parliamentarian. I think that Cornelia through UNESCO. This is not dedicated to science diplomacy, but it was a little bit another type of capacity building we were doing for policymakers and for legislators. So in science diplomacy, we had a really experience on that, but it's not there is no continental program for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it is a bit at the willingness of somebody like yourself to be able to engage and do that capacity building across the continent. It's not a systematic endeavor.
There is Mahlet.
Yes, there's Mahlet. Maybe she has some thoughts.
Yes, just adding on to that, cognizant really of that need to strengthen Africa's competitive sort of position as a global actor, S&T actor, so to say. STISA is now, the new STISA is now is taking a more meaningful approach to strengthening science diplomacy, to use diplomacy and partnerships to build member states' scientific capacities to really promote technology transfer, for instance. On the STISA 2034, you would see under the strategic priority on strengthening science diplomacy and partnerships, actions that are geared towards strengthening science diplomacy and promoting science diplomacy for STI to play a meaningful role in socio-economic developments. We have the overall objective of really strengthening Africa's voice and participation in international negotiations and policy development, as you articulated, Pierre, as exists in other MEAs as well. So it's taken that direction, but has been deliberate in the objectives that it has proposed to advance that engagement. So I will really encourage colleagues to have a look at that and familiarize ourselves with what we have proposed in the strategy document. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful, and it's good that the progress is being made on that. I wanted to try and allow our colleagues who still have their hands up. Yahya Chouachi, is this a question related to the presentations that we've just heard, or was it from the previous set of presentations? Yahya, are you able to speak up?
Very important for me to see, and that's why we go to this assignment. Is to see whether we really.
I'm sorry, we're having a lot of trouble hearing you. Are you close to the microphone?
Of leadership, doing the transformative leadership in your own specific function. And I say that different groups were able to apply it in different ways or to different aspects of the work. And that was very interesting to look at.
Okay. I'm hoping that one of my colleagues is able to hear this, to be able to answer you maybe in the chat. Okay.
No, the sound was really not sufficient. Sorry.
No. Okay. Well, maybe we can follow up with you directly. Then I have Hien Pham. Is your audio working a little bit better, Hien? There we go. You're unmuted. No, I'm not hearing anything either. And then the last person with their hand up is Hambani Mashaleni.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You actually have you have the question I wanted to ask already on the chat, but this question is really around the question you asked with regards to building on the lessons that we learned from STISA 2024, from development to implementation. How can we really ensure a robust and effective implementation of its successor, STISA 2034? I really liked the issues you raised around how can we develop and apply meaningful implementation metrics that you raised so as to drive action and tangible progress. I think this question is very critical as it is the potential to unlock doing business as unusual, to do something different and recognize the implementation of our science on the continent. And I was really wondering from the panelists, what are the key recommendations that we can give or this platform, the African Union, to ensure that the next STISA, in the next 10 years, we really realize implementation on the ground? We have seen the EU raising different issues such as implementation, funding, all those kind of things. How then do we navigate this next decade of the strategy? Are we not going to repeat the same thing? What are the key recommendations that can come from the panelists? I'm really looking at you, Pierre. I think you can help us out to say, what can we really do differently to assist the continent to realize implementation in the midst of all these difficulties? Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. I think I will leave that question because I have no answer to it, but I think I will leave it to Ms. Kabede and Dr. Conte to perhaps follow up with you directly, and maybe we can communicate that in our next session because we really only have 1 minute to wrap up. I don't want to have people leaving yet. Thank you very much for that intervention, and hopefully they will be able to answer you directly. Can I hand it over to Zheng Mei for a quick wrap up? Sorry for running over time, Zheng Mei.
Yes, thank you very much, Pierre. I just have one slide for the summary of the session. Can you please confirm if you can see my slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, dear participants. Let us just use this last minutes to briefly reflect on the journey we've taken together. And thank you very much for dear speakers for all your insightful thoughts. Today, we began with a fundamental question: what are the current obstacles? And while STI holds great promise, we heard how the misalignments can limit its ability to address urgent challenges. And to bridge some of these gaps, effective STI policymaking must involve all stakeholders across all sectors and across the entire policy cycle. This also calls for a shift from a national to international perspective on cooperation, guided by principles like inclusiveness, open science, and science diplomacy. We then zoom into how challenge-led STI roadmaps as an approach, practical tool to help ensure that STI respond more to local needs and priorities. But designing better policies also means producing better evidence. And for that, intergovernmental approaches to producing science must uphold scientific scientific credibility, political legitimacy, and policy relevance. And we've seen that policymaking is not a one-size-fits-all process. It requires a mix of capacities at analytical, operational, and political level. Those policy capacity gap analysis can help countries to better identify such gaps, and also that's also one of the important reasons why we are here today to strengthen capacity building. And finally, there's great value in learning from each other. Today, we heard two powerful regional experiences: the development of STISA 2034 and the implementation of SEDEC protocol on STI. And in this presentation, we've also, Rioboka also stressed the importance of an aspect like gender equality. And both presentations build on, both strategies were built on inclusive multi-stakeholder engagement. And more importantly, they also show the power of regional alignment to create synergy and coordination. So as we can see from this session, there's no single blueprint for STI policymaking. Each country and region has its unique traits, but through inclusiveness, evidence-based policymaking, and collaborative approach, we can move closer to the STI systems that truly serve sustainable development and build the Africa we want. And with that, I'd like to thank you again, dear speakers and participants, for your time and insights, and for all your contribution in the chat. And for the next session, we'll discuss STI policy instruments. And now I'd like to hand over to Dimo to just say a few words before we close this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zheng Mei. I think it was an excellent session. We'll get into some more details on Wednesday, where we'll be talking about challenges of policy instrument design and implementation. we have a special start to this. In the chat, you will find a link to a video. I want to ask all the participants to watch this video before showing up on Wednesday morning. For those who do not have enough time to do this tomorrow, the Wednesday morning session will start a half hour early with the showing of the actual video, whereas the formal session will start as usual at 10. So please, everyone, either watch the video or show up at 9:30 on Wednesday morning, where the video will be showing on the same Zoom link. So thanks again, and looking forward to what will be, I hope, an as excellent discussion and a webinar session as was today's. So thank you very much, and see you on Wednesday.